In my opinion, segregation has always been a part of human culture. I believe that it is within our own nature to be discriminatory towards others. Until the human race as a whole can look past the differences of others to realize that we are all in this world together and we all bleed red, we will be stuck in a perpetual machine of discrimination and hate. Before the Jim Crow laws were judged unlawful, they mandated that non-white citizens do not occupy the same space or area of those of whites. When the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed, lawmakers determined that discrimination on the basis of race, religion, color, or national origin was illegal and all people were allowed access to any public domain. In 1954, the Supreme Court passed a ruling in Brown v. the Board of Education that determined the term separate but equal is against the law. In an attempt to facilitate desegregation within schools, the federal government supplied funds to assist but were revoked in 1981 by Ronald Reagan, and since then, racially inclusive education has no longer been supported by federal funds or resources. Judicial proceedings in 1971 from the PARC guarantees free appropriate education, a least restrictive learning environment, due process, and periodic review, which in 1972 was extended to all students with disabilities. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act protected equal opportunity for employment and public services, and extended the definition of a disability to those who are also living with AIDS. In the same year and later on in 1997, IDEA establishes person-first language, where the person comes before their disability. They also provide services for social work, along with assistive technology and rehabilitation services, parent participation, and also identify two new categories where the states are required to provide bilingual education, along with transitional services and IEPs. The most recent version of this law is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004.
Hi Tina, how are you?
I'm good, Peter. Just dropping my kids off at school. You?
Same. I've come to dread taking my youngest child to school. He recently got an IEP, and I don't understand how it all works.
It can be confusing. One of my kids has an IEP too. I might be able to answer a few of your questions.
Really? That would be great. First of all, what does IEP stand for?
IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. It is required under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act for children with disabilities.
What is it supposed to do?
It is supposed to ensure that your child get a quality education by creating a plan that includes yearly goals, accommodations, modifications, and classroom and extracurricular activity supports.
It is supposed to include all that? It seems like all we talked about at the IEP meeting was all the things my child could not do.
In the meeting, they are actually supposed to talk about your child's strengths and interests. This will help the IEP team write the IEP in a way that will most help your child.
Really? What should I do, since that didn't happen?
Well, as a parent, you are an equal member of the IEP team, so you can request a new IEP meeting at any time.
I'd like to call a meeting and focus it on my child's strengths and interests. That seems more productive.
Did they give you a copy of your parent rights?
I think so, but I haven't taken the time to read them yet. Are they important?
Yes, very important. I can tell you a few, if you would like.
That would be great.
Well, one thing to know about is called prior notice. The school is supposed to give you notice, in writing prior to an evaluation, IEP meeting, making changes to services or placement, or before substantial disciplinary decisions are made, to name a few.
That's good to know. What else?
If you and the school can't come to an agreement about services in the IEP, you can request mediation. This is a free service, and facilitated by a trained, impartial mediator.
In 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act required free appropriate education, an IEP, and provided the first definition for what constitutes a least restrictive learning environment. The Vocational Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibited discrimination against students with disabilities and defined the terms handicapped person and appropriate education. During 1986, free appropriate education was made available to children between the ages of 3 and 5 and established early intervention programs from birth until 2 years of age. This was supported from researchers that showed the effectiveness of early intervention. It is inevitable that we will encounter a broad spectrum of students within our careers as teachers. If we make it past the first 3 years, that is. Today, more and more students with disabilities are being integrated within the standard classroom in an initiative to educate them at the same level as their peers and make them accomplish more for themselves through the use of assistive technology and school-wide inclusion. I could read from the book and define what inclusion is, but I have my own working definition that I will get into later, but I digress. Before I attended this course, I had a concept of what assistive technology was, but in a sense where only individuals with disabilities warranted their use within the classroom. I was also under the impression that all assistive technology was expensive, fancy dancy stuff. Well, I was wrong, and now I have a better understanding that assistive technology devices can be designed from inexpensive supplies as well as fancy dancy supplies, and they can also be integrated within the classroom for whole student use and not just the individual student with a disability. This also helps avoid a student with a disability being ridiculed for receiving special treatment in using an assistive technology device. From what I've observed myself, assistive technology can benefit all individuals and not just students with a disability. However, in the case where an expensive or specialized AT device is deemed necessary by a student's IEP plan, it is our job as their teacher to become familiarized with their equipment so that it does not impede the student's learning or cause any disruption during the class. Getting in contact with the relevant AT service for the device is another responsibility. These services allow the student to obtain, select, and use the device. They also permit the school to buy or lease equipment, select or adapt devices, and provide training on devices for students, teachers, and families. To me, the most important action to take so that the student may get the most out of his or her AT device is to request the associated training first before it's even offered for you. Be proactive. To me, the most important action to take so that the student may get the most out of his or her AT device is to request the associated training on the device so that we can conduct an assessment and determine whether or not the device is actually helping or not, or if it's just a piece of junk. Oh yeah, and don't forget to have a plan on how you will implement your assistive technology within your classroom. Earlier I mentioned about my working definition of what I believe inclusion to be. I am comfortable with myself in knowing that I will not be able to design an inclusive classroom within the beginning years of my teaching career. This does not bother me at all. I view this profession as one that demands great integrity and personal sacrifice, both of which I have come very familiar with. Even though I won't be able to design a flawless inclusive classroom setting, I believe that once I develop professional relationships with my colleagues, that we'll be able to collaborate with each other for the better interest of our students. I think that one of the first things to be done, however, is to evaluate whether or not my coworkers even desire an inclusive school setting and approach with caution if they do. For example, if I come into a new workplace surrounded by teachers with years of experience who do not yet value my opinions or share the same ideals as I become the new guy that wants to change the world, but I digress again. So what is inclusion? Is it just making sure that students with special needs get treated all nice, play with their friends, and get some of the answers to the homework test because they get frustrated? No. To me, inclusion is something that will be a forever evolving educational practice because each generation of youngsters that we will soon teach come from a community that is becoming more and more complex as the days grow. The nuclear family model rarely exists anymore. 13-year-olds are getting pregnant, school shootings, and any other negative event that you can muster up. Whereas you can imagine a person 20 years your senior making the first initial statement of, "Back in my day." I make this point to present my next belief and what I have come to consider a definition of inclusion to me. No matter how many books we read, the types of classes we take at college, or how many examples of court cases I gave a few moments ago that shaped the special education in America, the world is continuously evolving around us and we will be in day-to-day contact with its newest progeny. That is why I believe at its core, inclusion is a fundamental thought process where we have to remain aware of how to interact with our students, disability or not, and apply ourselves to our work so that we may provide a learning environment for them that motivates them to gain success at a higher standard than what they have been told or led to believe they can or cannot accomplish.